Let's call the meeting to order. Would everyone please rise and join us as we say the pledge? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an addition to the agenda, and we'll place that at number 14. Call it teacher resignation, and Jeff will elaborate when it's time. So 14 would be teacher resignation. Having said that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda with the addition.
I'll make a motion.
Clint?
I'll second.
Jolene on the second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the approval with amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Scheduled presenters. Mr. Strauss is here to talk about the Targeted Services and Safety Committee. Jeff, would you lead us into that?
Certainly will. The first item up that Mr. Strauss will talk about would be our target services that we have in the district.
Yeah, so I was talking with Mr. Sampson and our whole safety committee throughout the whole school year, and then a couple months ago, we talked about giving the board an update at some point on safety committee, and then he also said that a couple of board members had just some questions about the nature of targeted services, so we decided let's do 2 quick presentations on the same night and see what questions y'all have. So this first one, targeted services. Jeff, you want to just go to the first slide there? So targeted service is something that through MDE is an intervention program for students in grades K through 8. So in this coming summer, for example, when we offer targeted services, we don't have any kindergartners technically in our system yet this summer. So for this summer, it's students that will be in grades 1 through 8 during the school year. It's for students in grades K through 8. Locally, we call it Bomber Academy. My contact at GCED always gets a kick out of that name because he just kind of funny little play on words there. It's considered an extended day and year programming. So you get to the next bullet point where it says learning experiences should center on grade progression. It cannot be homework help. For example, when you couldn't have it set up to be like tutoring time. It couldn't be an extracurricular activity, a club, a sport, something like that. It has to be some type of intervention with the kind of supplementation of what's going on within the school day. Okay, so it can't be at either level, the elementary level or the middle school level. It can't be any type of homework help. We have a separate homework help program in the middle school that the Honor Society kids put on. So this is a little bit different than that. This is not mandatory. Students can't be placed in it. It's all recommendation, and the recommendations are based on FastBridge scores, other assessments, like we look at MCA data once in a while, other local assessments, teacher input is a big part of that.
Can you explain what FastBridge is?
Yes.
You may not understand what that is.
FastBridge testing, 3 times a year it's done. GCED, it's another thing that kind of is run through them, and the member districts run it once in the fall, once in the winter, once in the spring, usually September, December, January, depending on the year, and then April, May, kind of depending on the calendar. Obviously this past year was a little bit different. That assesses reading and math, and like where students are at in terms of grade level.
For all students?
Yep, and the intervention team at the elementary does a great job helping with that. There's, depending on the grade level you're at, there's one test or there's multiple tests. Combined though, it's, Jennifer, what is it? Even if you're in multiple assessments, it's a combined 25 minutes maybe? Because one of them is 5 minutes.
Yep.
It's pretty quick, even if the students have multiple assessments. So that's what FastBridge scores are. Thanks for that, Jeff. And then teacher input is the final thing. Obviously the teachers are being the ones that work with these students every day and kind of know what's working for a student, what's not working for a student, what might be, what other help might be beneficial. And generally, we offer something that you don't have to offer, that GCD doesn't mandate. We offer a snack and transportation as well. And on the next slide, I'll get into that a little bit with kind of the costs, the funding of things. So when it comes to Bomber Academy, as much as possible, we offer every single grade level that we can. Again, we don't have to, but we try to offer as many as we can. Last summer, for example, we didn't offer the third grade because we just didn't have enough staff members that were interested in doing it because it's extra for staff. We can't mandate staff to do this either. As far as the funding goes, this has to come through an ALC, so we have to run it through GCED because that's our ALC. There's an application process, and I'm actually working on that one now for our summer programming. My contact through GCED, his name's Brian Cashman. He's great about getting information out, answering any questions that I have, receiving the application. And then the funding comes into play as far as the revenue. It's a percentage of the general education revenue, and it's based on attendance hours. So the more a student is there, the more revenue is generated. And in the fall and in the spring, we consider that to be an hour and a half of students' contact time because we offer it from 3 o'clock till 4:30. In the summertime, it varies from year to year, but it's about 8 to 11. This year, I think we have it from 8 to 11:30, maybe 8:30 to 11:30, but it's around that same time frame. So obviously, there's a little bit different in terms of the attendance hours. In the summer, the per pupil funding decreases as a student gets older. So you can see the hourly rate right there. Kindergartners generate $6.02, and then you can see as it goes up throughout the grade levels. So that's where the revenue comes into play. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but we get our portion of that revenue after the school year's done, correct? Or towards the end of the school year?
Be through the GCD, so they'll do
Yeah.
a calculation at the end of it as they kind of true everything out.
Yep. And then as far as expenditures go, staff is the main part of that. Teachers is the main thing. Pairs, it kind of depends, depending on the students that attend. This spring, for example, we didn't have a single para on because the students, there wasn't a need for that. In the fall, we did have one para. Sometimes in the summer we do, sometimes we don't. It just depends on the students that are attended, which again is based on recommendation. And then whether the parents choose to have their students attend or not. Some do, some don't. Some say, oh, it just doesn't work this time because we're doing, sometimes there's the community ed programs after school, and the students, those are always on the same days that Bomber Academy might be. In the summer, you run into sometimes family trips or 4-H shows, county fair, things like that. So we're not always able to get all those students for that time either. But and then nurses, we usually have a nurse on staff for that as well. Transportation, as a district, we made that a priority. It does cost money, obviously, to have buses go out or vans go out or both go out in the morning and then in the afternoon, or if it's just after school in the evening to transport kids home. But we've generally had good numbers with students attending Bomber Academy, so we want to provide that opportunity if possible. Many schools in the area don't provide that transportation. Red Wing has the Hiawatha Land Transit that they can utilize within their whole city. We, however, we've just decided, yes, it's going to cost us money, but that's something that we value in terms of getting these kids into this programming, especially as long as the numbers are there for it. And then snacks. After school, we provide a snack for students. And then this summer, since we don't qualify for the summer meal program anymore, we are going to have some type of snacks that I'm working out with Lori right now on, what the timing of that is going to be and what we're going to have. We're going to try to offer a cheese stick and then some type of either, depending on the day, either a fruit or maybe a protein source, something like that, kind of to break up their morning. And then another expenditure is the GCED fee. They charge us a certain fee to be a part of this programming because we can't do it without them as our ALC. So that's just kind of the general, 10,000 foot view of targeted services, what we have, and then the funding and revenue and all that. Any questions at all?
Roughly how many people participate, would you say? If you
Per grade level, we right around 12. It kind of depends. Generally, when kids get into middle school, it's a little bit less. That's why we, for example, this summer we're having 7th and 8th grade combined with just one teacher. But K through 5, I'd say it's about 12. Sometimes a little bit more. We had one grade level this year that knew they were going to be the ones teaching it, and they kind of sent out a few more forms than they maybe should have, because they realized they had a lot more parents say yes than they thought they would. So they ended up with 20, I think, which is kind of a lot when you're trying to do some help. But we did have a pair in with them to help. But generally, 12 to 15.
You say that number stays through the summertime too, roughly?
Yeah. Yep,
And they have to be recommended to go?
Yep.
Like, so it's teacher recommendation only, like?
teacher recommendation
Or
based on,
tests
yep,
and
all
stuff,
that, yep.
but,
We do have some parents that once in a while reach out, and then we kind of just have that conversation with the teacher, with the parents, with Jennifer, myself, over whether or not, or Tim and myself if it's in this building,
yeah.
over whether or not it would be a good
It
fit,
would be
if the time works and
beneficial
all
or
that.
not,
Yep.
okay.
Are parents, since we do the transportation, are parents encouraged if they have the means to bring their kids in to do that? I mean, do we,
So what we
just
do
if
is,
we can save on a bus or?
yep, so what we do is on the form, there's a yes and a no. There's yes, I do want transportation home, there's no, and then I will drop off and pick up my kids, if it's a summer, or just pick up if it's during the school year. My child will walk or bike home. For this summer now, for example, we have a Cannon Kids bus, since Cannon Kids is gonna be at the CCC, so I asked Allison if we could work out to have one bus, just pick up kids in the morning from there and take them there, because that's where a lot of our kids will come from.
But we don't bus everyone, so what we have always said is, we kind of have, if this is what we transport on a normal day-to-day in the Cannon Falls boundaries, we do slim that down a little bit, like, we can't have it be where it normally is throughout the school year, or we'll have drivers out there forever in bus rides that are a while. So I think on the form it says if you've received transportation in the past, you're probably in that kind of circle, I would.
Okay.
And since I started with this, and probably your last few years too, we generally have 3 vehicles that
Yep.
go out. Usually one bus takes anybody within the city limits, and then 2 vans go out to drop students off that are in the countryside. And we try to stick with that for budgeting purposes to make sure we're not all of a sudden having 5 vehicles go out. And we communicate with Allison. I just sent her my sheet today so she can start working on some routes. She communicates with us well regarding that too.
And she's really cautious on making sure that we're not putting kids on buses for a long time.
Yep.
Like, that's not,
Yep.
no.
Especially during the school year, students, if the bus doesn't take off till 4:30, if a student happens to be the last one off on a country route, they might not get home till 5 o'clock on a weeknight. That's a lot, especially for a younger student. So she's very good about planning out the routes and communicating it with families. She practices out the routes on her own, and then she will communicate with every single family, this is the time your student will be home.
So how old is the program? Maybe 10 years old?
That I don't know.
I can remember, it dates me, but I remember when we started,
Yeah,
Well, it's been here since we've been here, so that's 9 years.
yeah, I would say not much more than that, because it was really in its first year or two when I came to the district.
I think Jackson and Coop were both like 3rd graders. or
Yeah.
4th graders at the
Yeah, or
time.
second maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe in 2nd grade.
Any other questions for either Jen or Steve?
Thank you for.
Thank you, Sue. Safety.
And Mr. Strauss is up again.
So, second little presentation of the evenings on our safety committee. So just in general, our safety committee, we meet generally about 4 times a year, more as needed, but that's kind of what we've done since I've been here. We have a couple teacher representatives from each building. There's admin on there, Pam is on there, Dave Peterson's on there, Reed is on there. Try to get as many kind of people working in the different scenarios as we can, the different stakeholders that specifically work here on the day-to-day things in terms of safety and security. Blue Team is a big part of this. Blue Team is the kind of the emergency response team within the school, if you want to think of it as that way. All of our drills and all of our active scenarios this year have gone well. After drills, the Blue Team always meets and has kind of a debrief, what went well, what didn't go well, reminders. One big reminder just that we always put out is if you go by an AED on your way to something, grab it, whether or not there's 3 of them there or there's 1 of them. We don't want all of them there if possible, just because if somebody forgets, whatever, if you go by an AED, you grab it. So we do reminders like that. And for active scenarios, we obviously do that as well. As much as possible, Pam communicates with Jennifer or Tim on, that day after school, if possible, if we can kind of debrief on a scenario. Otherwise, the next morning or the next day after school, that way we can go over what went well, what didn't go well, what could we change, how quick was our response, how quick was the response if we needed to call 911, all of those things. Membership on the Blue Team, that's frequently discussed just because We want to make sure we have quick coverage, so in both buildings, we try to make sure we have people on the different sides or the different wings of the building, near different exits and entrances. And plus, we don't want, for example, on that end of the building, we don't want just Brent Zimmerman on it. We also have Erica Schrottnick on it, so we got 2 people, so that way if somebody's gone, somebody else is on it. Life Back was added to the nurses kit, 4 or 5 months ago, something like that, maybe not quite that long. AEDs are now on a replacement schedule. That's something that we talked about on the safety committee, actually. So one was also added to the bus garage. We found out that that was a place that we didn't have an AED, so we added one down there, and now there's AEDs are on a replacement schedule for, I believe it's one to get replaced every year. And then the Narcan bill that's in the legislature. Some schools are having Narcan in their school right now. It's a voluntary thing, schools don't have to. There was one bill in the legislature that was going to mandate that schools had Narcan. And that would be if there was like an opioid overdose. It would be kind of up to the schools, at least the one bill that I read, but there would be like a Narcan nasal spray that could help somebody if there was an opioid overdose. And yeah, Jeff, we actually just communicated earlier that as of now, we haven't seen anything official on that,
I
right?
haven't seen anything official on, they were talking about having a bill that required schools to have Narcan in each building.
Mhm.
But the legislature and you today will wait a little
We'll
bit
see.
longer.
Yeah.
What comes, because usually those things are hidden in the finer print.
Yep.
So we'll see how that ends up.
And then the drills that we do, 5 fire drills throughout the year, 1 tornado drill each spring on the, April, whatever the date is, at 1:30 in the afternoon. And then there's 5 lockdown drills that we do. Those are coordinated with our ALICE training that each building does. And that's, grade level a little bit different as you get younger or as you get older. And then most of our drills are coordinated district-wide as well. Some districts do this differently, but since we have our 2 buildings, just 2 buildings, and they're so close in each other, we do pretty much every drill. I don't know if we do every single one, but we do pretty much every fire drill. Both buildings are doing it at the same time, whether it's a fire drill or a lockdown drill. Next slide. And just some other stuff in terms of trainings and different things that we've done. We'd have some different meetings with local agencies. Oh, and we have either Chief McCormick or Lieutenant Berg generally are on our safety committee meetings as well. We meet with them, fire emergency crews. We met with the Minnesota School Safety Center multiple times throughout the year. We're kind of building up towards a tabletop exercise that will hopefully take place this fall. Public information officer training, Jeff, Tim, Jennifer, and myself went through that a couple months ago. That was just kind of how to respond to media, things to say, things not to say, and how to get yourself organized. And that was something put on by the Minnesota School Safety Center. A great resource. They provide everything for free. So they're actually coming down next week for something. Everything they do, they do for free. They have a former SR, school resource officer on the School Safety Center. They've got other people that have worked within schools, and they've got police officers on it, and they provide all this training for free. So they got people that have worked in schools and with law enforcement and in terms of an SRO, both. The threat assessment presentation, Jennifer, Alicia, and myself went to that a couple months ago, and then we have another threat assessment meeting with the School Safety Center next week, so we can kind of get something more going with that, so we can just assess if, a student or an individual in the area is a potential threat, and then how do we respond to that. And then safety conference this summer, Jennifer and myself are going to that. That's June 20th and 21st, I believe. And then tabletop exercise tentatively scheduled for this fall. Still working out details on that. My main contact with the county, Josh Hansen, isn't working in that position anymore. He was their kind of like emergency management person. So I'm working on connecting with their new person that was just starting this week, I believe. So going to talk with them, going to meet a couple times with them and plan out something that we can have this fall where we will have county and then local agencies in conjunction with school officials going through a tabletop exercise.
What would that kind of consist of, a tabletop exercise?
So that would be where we're all in probably this room together.
With the table.
Yes, with the table, thanks Jeff. And we would kind of walk through, okay, there's an event that happens, what's your response, what's your response, what are we all doing right now, how long does it take to get there? And Jeff, you had said, were you in a district before, or was Tim in a district?
Yeah, when I
Where
was
staff
high
was
school
working on-
principal in Medford, we did a tabletop exercise with the emergency county services and local authorities. And we sat around, everybody was here, and really it prevents us from working in a silo. You know, the school knows what they are doing, emergency services knows what they are doing, and law enforcement knows what they are doing, but getting all three of those to understand what everybody is doing, so if we're in the middle of a situation, I know what law enforcement is doing as we are doing what we are doing here, so we don't cross
For sure.
paths, if you will, and
Be
get
more
in each other's way, right?
And that was done on a staff development day, right? With some debriefing afterwards with
Yeah.
staff? That's kind of tentatively what we
We actually
talked
did
about.
we had some student actors that did a, school shooting, and we walked through that tabletop exercise, and we had, the city and county officers and EMTs did what they do with live vehicles, and they brought it Mayo One. It was almost like a mock crash type situation,
Yeah.
but for a school shooting.
Okay.
And so it was on a staff development day, and staff were watching it.
And that was the spring?
It was when I was a high school principal.
Oh, back,
About a
okay.
decade ago.
Yeah, oh, okay, okay, sorry.
No,
So that's something that we haven't done here yet, right?
No.
We haven't done like a mock,
no, and we talked through that as part of getting more involved with the Minnesota School Safety Center and emergency management people from Goodhue County. And they suggested that we do a tabletop exercise, but we had to get all of our stuff in order between us and EMS and law enforcement so that we could all sit down at the table.
And just to clarify, we do our Alice
Yeah, I was gonna-
drills.
for sure.
So that's when
Yeah.
we have scenarios for
Yep.
staff and
Mhm.
it's a live event.
Yeah,
They all
yeah.
have to have safety goggles on
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
we do that.
The idea of a mock where the schools are working with the resources in the community and stuff like that, is a really good idea.
Yeah, the county's been great to work with, helping us. When we initially talked about this, they said, before you do that, let's do all of these trainings first. So we got all these things kind of in place. They've been great to work with. The school safety center has been phenomenal. Yeah, it's been good working with them this year.
The School Safety Center did a tour earlier this year and was very impressed with where we are at.
Yes, they said they use us when they go to other schools a lot of times to talk about either the procedures we do or the physical things we have in place or the policies we have. They said they've just been very impressed with the things that we have throughout the building, throughout both buildings, I should say, for the whole district.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there another slide?
I think that's it.
Nope.
Any questions? I know we had a couple there. Anything else?
What's life back?
Jolene, do you want to explain that?
I certainly can. I had introduced that to Pam as a backup option for if somebody's choking.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I just
So-
hadn't heard of it.
So, like if you were in a hospital or you were in an ambulance or something like that, you're choking, we're just gonna grab suction
Oh,
off the
right.
wall and just,
So that it's a
suck it right
suction.
out.
It's
Yes,
basically just
basically.
suction. Okay.
Whereas in a home setting or a school setting, it's gonna be the Heimlich maneuver, which is
Right.
not always foolproof.
Right.
So this is basically a one-way valve system. So think of like a little mini plunger almost.
Oh,
Even
sure.
if you were to go back and forth, it won't push it
It won't
backwards.
push it
No,
in.
it doesn't allow that. It's a one-way system.
Cool.
So that's there and it's
That's
in both
great.
buildings and.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm glad there's been some acknowledgement of the work that's been done in our safety committee, because we are leaders and we have had active scenarios within this last year, and everything is been done in an exemplary manner. I'm just so proud of the district and where they are with their safety. And congratulations to the blue team and all the support that they give and get. You've done a phenomenal job when we've had to use it.
Yep, and our teacher reps are awesome about attending and giving their input and everything. It's just, yeah, everybody that's on the safety committee, it's a valued committee. There are good discussions as we go throughout the year.
What's a way for someone from the public, or concerned citizen, parent, whatever else, how can they contribute to the committee, or how can they get any concerns or any suggestions that they have? How can they present that? Or is this an open meeting or no?
These are not.
Okay.
And this is something that we do have those things every once in a while, come from students, come from parents, come from other staff members that are on the committee, bring us questions, we put them on our agenda for our next meeting. If it's something that would require further immediate attention, we have a quick meeting, or we put it on our weekly admin meeting on Thursdays, and then sometimes bring those back.
I
to the
think
safety committee.
where you're saying if you have people in the community that have questions or have ideas.
Yes.
I think just send them to Stephen and you can
Yep.
certainly.
That'd be okay?
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
Okay.
If it's something, it can be to me, it can be, I would say me, Tim, or Jennifer, depending on which building it is.
Yeah, I've had a few reaching out, and I wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I had a few citizens that were wanting to start their own committee. So,
Yep.
But, yeah, that's all I wanted.
Yeah,
That's all I
absolutely,
have
send
on
them my way.
this.
Yep, thanks.
So the AEDs,
Yep.
how many staff are certified and what's the kind of the repeat training?
We do training on CPR and AED every other year, so that way everybody's licensed
So
for that.
And that's the norm for.
Yep.
recertification
2 years, yep.
or 2 years.
as far as expectations, is every staff member expected to do it?
Yep.
Yeah, I was.
Yep, during workshop week, it's kind of on a rotating basis.
And the nice thing about those AEDs is they're kind of dummy proof.
Yeah, they sell
They
them.
really
Yeah,
are.
they are.
Yeah,
Which
We
is
do
good,
that
which is
too.
good,
lots of
yeah.
pictures.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Mhm.
Just apply the stickers and hit a button. Right.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
Yep.
Communications and reports, we have no student rep here. Committee members, anything for the cause?
Yeah, we had our POC committee met for the construction, mostly, we met twice, mostly based around change orders that were happening with the construction, which are pretty standard. When you're going through construction, you have, Clinton was at one of them, I think, everything seems to be in line as far as timing. Tim may cringe if I say that, but materials and water showing up, they're starting to stage out on the side of the building. But yeah, it seems to be on, we had some change orders, but pretty standard procedure.
Gym floor's covered.
Gym floor's covered, so really.
Hallways are covered.
Yeah. They did that,
Still on track on under budget?
yeah, well under budget as of today, so we're in good shape there. Also, extracurricular met a couple times. Some of those are on the agenda for tonight. The one thing that isn't on the agenda that we discussed was the outdoor facilities vision in the future, and nothing happening immediately, but just getting a plan in place for when those days may or potentially happen, so we don't end up redoing things. So I think that was a good thing to at least get started.
Okay, so I got it. Anyone else?
You want to talk about the foundation?
Me?
Yeah, do you want to know?
Sure.
You want to take that one?
Sure.
Take the other ones?
That foundation, there wasn't a whole lot to report on, just end of the year kind of numbers where our budget's at, 24,
Yeah, roughly.
right around 24,000. So we're sitting good there numbers wise. Yeah, and we'll be talking about that tonight, new members for that foundation. Else on community yet? Programming getting started here,
Yeah.
what, next week?
Yeah, yep. They were talking about, they really like the speaker, Joe Beckman, and they were even kind of talking around the idea of potentially using maybe some of his learning materials that he kind of has, maybe utilizing that in the buildings. He offers, they like sell products and stuff like that, materials and stuff, but they really like that. They talked about the new speaker, maybe kind of going every other, changing up the speakers, like this one this fall, I think it's like a safety, more topic, internet safety type of stuff. They also talked about trying to get more information out about them, and maybe potentially doing it on like Bomber Days, setting up like a table, like a booth type situation, because especially when you're new to the district, you don't always know, like the Ed Foundation, what is it, how do they run, who runs it, what do they do, what do they supply, and all that kind of fun stuff, and is that the same as PTO, or there's just a lot of confusion, and so I had suggested on Bomber Days, I said, you wanna get as many parents' eyeballs on you, I said that'll be the day, especially at the elementary building. So they kind of tossed that idea around, and Otherwise, I also was in the staff development meeting. They talked about adjusting PLC times. They talked about teachers not using as much education money as they did previously, so they have some leftovers. So they kind of toss around some ideas on what to do with that. They talked about potentially increasing the payments for mentors for the new teachers and all that kind of fun stuff. They also talked about the racial equity and kind of bringing up more topics like that in the buildings and stuff like that, like education for the teachers, more so kind of thing. And the community ed, they said that the summer Can Kids is about like 110 participation, so it looks good. Preschool numbers are trending up, and they were just adjusting the release time of the community ed booklet just because of the new start time and everything like that, and trying to find a good time to get that information out and to appease to everybody. So, that's what I got.
You were busy.
And
Yeah, yes.
we gotta make sure that soccer and baseball is released at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
That was,
Soccer, so
there was some tension in that.
Yes, correct, yeah.
So that's gotta
Yeah,
be released at
yeah.
the same time.
gotta compete with those soccer kids.
But soccer's not a community ed event, or, right?
Right,
Yeah.
we're going through the St. Paul's, but
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
release time, we gotta be
They're
communicating
snagging the
with
kids
them.
from us, no.
Anyone else? Okay, administrative board reports. It looks like we've got posted copies here within your agenda. Jen, you have anything to add?
No, nothing beyond what's on there.
Okay, thank you.
I would just speak to the music concert that went on, the second and third grade concert was fantastic. It was the first one I had been to, and the auditorium was packed, completely full. Really cool event, the kids were having fun, Ms. Brown does an awesome job.
She did a really good job, like keeping all of those kids organized and on task,
Yeah.
all of them at the same time, it was impressive.
And then oops.
So I was gonna say there's a special gift for music teachers in January, yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
Especially who choose to put 2 grade levels at once.
Yeah, right.
yeah, for sure, there's a lot of bodies up there, yeah.
And then I thought the 252 positive phone calls was a really cool thing, that, I don't know who thought of that or where that came from, but that was really cool. In a time where negativity is everywhere and these kids are faced with seeing those things, to have that is pretty cool, so, thank you.
I think it was fun for staff to be reminded how good it feels for them,
Yeah,
especially if, like a specialist teacher seeing the entire population in the elementary. It takes a lot for them to reach out to families and whatnot. And Mr. Peterson is really good at sending me the latest and greatest on Twitter. He's a paraprofessional in our building right now. And so he sent it to me about a school, I think down south, that had done 100 phone call challenge in 4 weeks. And then I just took that and was like, 100?
Yeah.
It's like nothing. So then I just paired it with 252.
It's like it.
very cool, thank you.
Head of building and operations, he's got a post here, community ed and activities. Reed's not available tonight. Superintendent's report.
Yes, thought I'd give a quick legislative update. The legislature ending today, sounds like, wrapping things up. For the most part, the educational items are done with, and to kind of give some 10,000-foot views on that, the new revenue coming in for the next biennium, which is the next 2 years, is 4% and 2%. Cross subsidy was funded at 44% for this coming year and 50% for the following year. There are some summer unemployment mandates that have come through as well as paid family leave, and we are still looking at all of the details with that. And there are some class size mandates also, which may or may not affect us depending on what the numbers are that have come through. I know people are waiting with bated breath about the results from the survey from the school calendar. I was asked repeatedly at graduation the other night about that. And so the staff came back with 75% for and 25% against. And the parents came back with roughly 60% against and 40% for. And so at this point, we'll stay with the normal calendar as is, and so we'll create one here. probably this fall for the next year like we normally do, and then get back in our 2-year cycle after that. So, as most of you know, Tim Hodges has been selected as the Southeast Minnesota Principal of the Year. Congratulations, Tim, and it's well deserved for that. So hopefully he's kind of shy about that, but I think we put it out on social media and it got hit pretty well with a lot of comments and stuff. So good for him. Update on the athletic trainer services. Mr. Olson, I'm glad you could probably make it here after our Bomber game. I'm heard that we were doing well and we still won.
Good win, 4 innings, 18-0.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Play the winner of Del Rio and Lourdes tomorrow, 5 o'clock.
Right out back here?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So just an update on the athletic trainer services. Reed put this in his report as well. I see the following organizations have said no to offering athletic training services to Cannon Falls at this point. Mayo Clinic, which is I'm classifying as the main one in Rochester. Mayo Clinic Health Systems, Cannon Falls. ONC, both the main clinic and the clinic here. TCO out of the Twin Cities, TRIA out of the Twin Cities, Summit out of the Twin Cities. We're waiting to hear back from NovaCare, which Reed has reached out to them as well. There is a potential option with our current athletic trainer that we are exploring right now. We have a couple of other options as well, which will look drastically different than what we have been doing the last few years. And so, depending on what other, if NovaCare comes back as a no, we're gonna have to probably start looking at the potential of opening up an advertisement, I guess, to see what is potentially out there. But there are a bunch of bad variables for that as well, because there needs to be some ties to medical facilities, I guess, and have doctors sign off on things. So we are still exploring that. If we can reach an agreement with our current AT, and if it's within reason, I might come back in June and have it open up that position to see if we can't see what we get for applicants, I guess, is the best way to say that. So, still working on it. As Luke mentioned, the construction project is well underway. With school let out now, it's kind of full go. There was a lineup to get into the back gate today with cranes and dump trucks and everything else. So we are under budget. We've had a few change orders that were mainly driven by code since we began the project, but other than that, it's going well. Social media report card. We get these quarterly updates, and so I thought I'd just share that with you in the packet here. That shows some of the very positive and highlights of it, and Jennifer's learning the 252-1 made one of the bigger jumps this year. Reached 407 people, so huge. Our followers continue to grow, which is great. We don't have May, June, July, and August as we had on this graph here, and so if you look at these comparisons here, we're well above last year's pace, so good engagement on this. And there's also a chart in here that you can look at later to see how we compare to other schools in the area as well, not necessarily in the area, but throughout the state. So continued good engagement. It's doing what we asked it to do, which is tell our story, and I think the messages are still getting out there. So, other than that, I think that is all I have for me, unless you guys have questions. Okay.
Nothing for Jeff? Okay, moving on. Thank you. Reed, is there anything you'd like to add to your post in here at all?
I just think the trainer where pieces, we're really getting the same message
in a response is we're short-staffed, or we don't have people that are willing to drive to Canaan Falls. So that's, I have a sliver of hope with either our current AT or if NovaCare gets back to us. But I don't know what we're gonna, I mean, we've talked about a couple ideas of what that's gonna look like, but it's definitely, if we're able to find somebody, it's definitely gonna look different next year, for sure.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, public input. Each person is allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The board may or may not engage in discussion during the comment period, but will take the information and find answers if appropriate. Due to data privacy concerns, the speaker may not address criticism toward an individual district employee during public input. Individual complaints should be handled privately with the building suit or administrators. As part of the board protocol, it is unacceptable for any speaker to slander or engage in character assassinations at a public board meeting. Does anyone wish to speak on behalf of any topic at all concerning the school? Moving on. Consideration to approve the finance report. Mr. Davis?
Pretty short version now is we're kind of winding down the end of fiscal '23 and into '24. So there's a lot of numbers going on in our office right now as we will present the '24 prelim budget tonight, and then next June or the next meeting you'll see the revised '23. Also, I'm part of doing that for my purposes, for myself. The plan is updating cash flow worksheet, which is what you'll see here. So all this only goes through the end of the fiscal year. Currently, in the office, we're working through all of next year's cash flow. A lot of it is pretty driven by formula and what we do based on historical information, but a lot we kind of determine on where the legislature ends up falling. But currently what you have here is through the end of fiscal year, June 30th, and some of the kind of the bigger highlights, and I'll slide me down some here, there you go. We've got some funds coming into the district relatively soon here with the Invenergy dollars. There's a city portion and a school portion. The school portion is set at, for 20 years at the $210,000 received directly from Invenergy. And then there's a portion that has a slight inflationary increase to it that we receive from the city directly. Of those funds, we designate each year about $159,000 of that to facilities type projects. The reason being is prior to paying off the elementary roof project, that was the amount of the payment, so to speak, for the roof. So it kind of makes sense to keep those into facility dollars as it was if we're replacing some of those types of items. Other funds that you'll see there is we've kind of seen in our, whether your mortgage statements or directly to your escrow, is your first half of your property taxes will be paid. Meaning that the district will be receiving some funds at the end of May, beginning of June, and those are listed as estimates. We don't get the actual amounts from the county release until usually the day before they're released. They should be out this week. It's scheduled to be that, I think, May 25th and then June 2nd or 3rd, and then they usually kind of released. Those are estimates. They should be pretty close to those amounts, but once we get the actuals from the counties, then we'll update those as they come. Some of the bigger expenditures are going to be the payroll. Obviously, that's about 75% of what we do is salary benefits. A little bit larger than normal payroll will be the June 15th, as there'll be some cleanup on coaches for the spring, generally is in that one. And then also in the June 15th, June 30th, you'll see some of the teacher payout sort of items start to come at that time as we kind of process for the end of the fiscal year. Even though we end the fiscal year of June 30th, teacher contracts would also have payments that they're received in July 15th, July 30th, and August 15th. So there'll be some just recognition of funds in there. The other thing, kind of last one to kind of note on this, is we talked about the project that's going on. We talked about this at the finance committee a little bit. I've been trying as much as we can with cash flow. We're doing pretty good in terms of cash flow. Remember, this cash flow is not just general fund, it's all funds. So there's debt service dollars in there, as well as food service, community, and trust and agency dollars in there. So it's not just general fund. We have a pretty good, healthy cash flow. So as long as we're able to kind of float some of those project costs. I've been holding back on reimbursing the district itself from those building funds because we're trying to earn as much interest as we possibly can in that district or that building project. So as we get near the end of the project, whether it be items pop up, contingency is not enough to cover whatever it may be, or maybe there's some items that we either missed or we feel like they'll be done at that time, we have more funds available, we can do that. When I talked to Ehlers about a week and a half ago, even the money market is making 4.5%, and some of the shorter term bonds, even just the 30 days, are over 5, or close to 5.5%. So as long as we can hold back some of those, we'll try to earn as much money for the future as we can for interest. Now that we're kind of full blown into construction, dollars will start moving out the door much more quickly, and we'll need to get reimbursed for those funds a bit more quickly. But in terms of time and the ability to get some of those dollars for interest, having sold those bonds in fiscal 22. You'll see when we talk about the prelim budget too. We've had that revenue on hand for a while. There's been some projects that we've paid for. There's design fees and those sorts of costs, and we did the CCC roof last summer. So there have been some costs that have gone out, but we need to hold a bulk of that in investments and get some interest. So we should be well over $100,000 in interest when all things are said and done, which is good for the project. Because it doesn't take a whole lot for something to make a change order and add some dollars to those things. So good news there in terms of, I guess, the rate that we can get. Maybe bad news depending on if you're trying to borrow money, I guess, is a little bit. But good for this in this instance anyway. So if any questions on this, I can surely do my best to answer.
Questions for Josh? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the finance report as shown.
I'll move to approve.
Luke on the motion,
I'll second.
Katie on the second. Other discussion? All in favor of the finance report as shown, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent agenda. Items under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be enacted under one motion. In the event a board member wishes to discuss any item, it can be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. We usually start with Jeff making some acknowledgement of acceptance of gifts.
Yes, I will get to that in just a second, but first of all, as part of the personnel items, you'll see Julie Rich in there will be retiring after a lot of years in the district, and so we do want to acknowledge her service here to the students and staff and parents and community members, thanking her for all of her years. So, with that being said, we will go to the acceptance of gifts, and we want to recognize the Cannon Falls Youth Athletic. I was gonna say VA, because I'm like, yeah, that isn't, okay, Youth Athletic. I have to have Lori spell that out next time. For $750 for volleyball nets. Cannon Falls Volleyball Incorporated for $2,500 for volleyball nets. And Gemini for the high school art department for $250. We want to thank these organizations for their generous donations.
Anything else on the consent agenda? Anyone have any questions? Move to approve by Bill,
I'll second.
seconded by Clint. Any other discussion? All in favor of the approval of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried. Turning the page, consideration to approve extracurricular committee recommendation to charge cooperative programs as an even split of all costs plus administrative expense.
This is a recommended item from the Activities Committee, or the Extracurricular Committee, excuse me. And this is a follow-up to the dissolution of some of the activity programs that we pair with Randolph in, and then this is a separate look at how we are charging our partnerships with these moving forward. And so the recommendation coming out of that committee was to charge the cooperative programs as an even split of all costs plus an administrative expense on top of that. And I don't know if you guys want to expand upon that from the committee.
Yeah, well, I think Clinton, in the last meeting, Clinton had asked about, what does the new charge look like, or whatever, so we had discussed that, and when, in the past, we had basically done because there are facilities, we have some of these expenses anyway, we were willing to take on a little more of the expenses than the co-op school maybe would. And further looking into that, we found that it was probably in our best benefit and more fair that it's just a 50-50 split. And so we will charge them more per student or per participant. And then with that was the administrative fee. Basically, we had taken a portion of Jeff and Reed, what they do on a daily basis and how it helps the co-op. Take a portion of that and apply it to a fee. And Josh, yeah.
Well,
And we hadn't done that in the past, and obviously there is time spent there with us offering it as a co-op program. So this is for the ones that we had kept, obviously.
And I really think that that's probably more of a more fair way to go, because really when you look at it, probably when you're having a sport or an activity, the facilities portion of it is the main expense. So cutting that in half, or splitting it in half, I think is definitely the right way to go. Whether they have one participant or 12 or 15.
Right.
If they're choosing to advertise that activity for their school, come up with half the cost.
Josh, were you gonna add something?
Well, if you want, I can explain kind of how the invoicing had been and how this would work now. In the past, what we would do is take all the expense for that season, so it's the coaches' salary benefits, any entry fees to tournaments, if they were on uniform rotation that year, any supplies, fees for officials, whatever, for that season, for that sport. Well, that's any revenue that would have came in for that sport. A lot of the co-op sports aren't revenue generating, they're not gated. The sports has to be a section game, and those gates go back to section. But any offset from whether if there are gate or student participation fees, also in that cost would be then the transportation for that. So we end up with the net cost. Say there were 100 track kids, 20 from Randolph. There's a per participant fee there. We bill for the 20 kids back to Randolph. The way it will go forward is all those costs will be determined again. Half of that cost will be billed out to the co-op. Kind of the assumption on that too is without the co-op, there's not the opportunity. The admin portion is basically taking Reed and Tammy's salary as they work most directly into activities. Both of them will be quoted as half activities, half community, so half their salary. A portion of mine, we just kind of determine an allocation of what percentage of my time might be billed to do some of the billing and whatnot. But we basically take and this will be another way we have to look at the calculation, the total number of participants that are serviced in our school for that year for activities, say it's 1,000, and if there were 40 kids from the co-op that participated, there's 40 divided by 1,000, that percentage would be 4%, that's kind of what we kind of divvy out. So I think in the kind of example, if I based it on what we did last year, it's only like $3,500 for that, and the admin fee is the cost of it. So 50% of the cost of the activity plus some admin fee is what's going forward is how it was billed.
But like the way it was before is when you're adding up, coaches' fees, transportation, whatever else, was there a facility upkeep designate?
No.
So really, they weren't paying for what our facilities were?
No, and the person I've gone back and forth to in the extracurricular committee, and I can do it a million ways to Sunday.
Well, I sure.
But it's also pretty hard to figure out, per square foot what the lights for that day, and how much that be really co-op or co-op. At the end of the day, without the co-op, the track is still our track, so the cost is going to be there. It's kind of how we kind of work through some of it, but the actual cost that happened that year, the coach's salary, the coach's benefits, the transportation, all those things, we can
Right.
I can sort of justify when I go back and forth, and our business manager calls and says, hey, what's the expense here? I'm not pulling a number out of the air for maybe a
Right,
cost, but
But before, like, if, we're just, and I'm just making up
Yep.
numbers, say it was $50,000 to redo the track.
Yep.
It's not like they were paying us 10 grand.
correct. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry.
Reed, anything to add to the conversation?
Oh, I think, we covered this over multiple meetings.
Multiple meetings.
A lot
I think the
of
biggest-
discussion about what that could look like, and I think where we got to the 50/50 was the example you just gave of figuring out the cost of the square footage of a light versus how many participants, and that would be difficult. at
Well, and
times.
janitorial costs and things like that. There were other things that you couldn't really put a number on. And so that kind of made it a little easier and you're able to speak to each and everything then. So, like Josh said, if there's a phone call, you can just kind of divide it out and show them exactly. So
Right.
I think it was a good communication and negotiations.
Yeah, and it was, from committee, it was unanimous to recommend this to the,
So just being clear, it starts in the fall.
Okay. So I would like a motion to approve the extracurricular committee recommendation to charge cooperative programs as an even split of all costs plus administration expense.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Bill,
I'll second.
second by Clint. Other discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consideration to approve an extracurricular committee recommendation to allow free admission for pre-K through 12 Cannon Falls students for all regular season Bomber home games on a 2-year trial.
This is another recommendation from the extracurricular committee, so I don't know if somebody wants to speak to that.
Well, the idea was to try and really generate student involvement and get students behind the programs. And I think there's some case studies that have shown that they've had numbers improve. It's not really a revenue generator necessarily in the first place, so why not try it? We wanted to do 2 years to try and take a look at the numbers, see if there's any changes. Are we losing money? Kind of looking at it that way. So.
yeah, no, Reed did a good job of contacting other schools within the HVL of what they do, and some don't do this, some do a version of this, and at the committee level, we thought it was just a giant win for our kids in Cannon Falls. I mean, we know kids, you know, and the times we're in, our parents are cutting certain things, and to be able to get them in our buildings and in our facilities is a giant win, in my opinion. It was funny, as we went through this, my wife works at a hospital in a substance abuse portion of the hospital, and they talk a lot about how high school events are like one of the only places families can go that there's no substance or going on, and they can do a family-friendly area. You know, you can't go to a Twins game, you can't, but in a high school, that setting is absolutely there, and I think that is super important to provide, you know, and, you know, if we could make, you know, because I believe that, you know, parents are now gonna go with their kids, you know, instead of dumping them off, they'll say, okay, if I only have to pay for myself, the kids are free, I'll go with them. And maybe it's a $20 event now versus 50, and just a giant win if we can approve this, and this was also unanimous, that we thought it was a good idea to go forward with this.
We used to have family passes that people would pay for. How does this affect that?
I think it'd be selling is more of the adult passes more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that will be part of that 2-year
Trial.
trials of data
Yeah,
come.
kind of do a comparison.
Yeah, and just trying to kind of remember back from one of those meetings where we pulled up, I want to say roughly about a third of the HBL schools are doing something similar to this. There's another 1, maybe 2 that, well, if more are thinking about it, we'll consider it too, and others didn't even have it on their radar. So, and we had some discussion, should that be just 9-12 students? Should it be 6-12, and it's like, well, where do you stop? And so we just said, as long as they're in our pre-K up through 12, they're our students, let's see if we can get them in here. Because we've all been to games where, you know, CFYA is playing at halftime, or it's a Just for Kicks performing at halftime. That's our biggest stands are filled, people that you don't traditionally see, and then usually when they're done at halftime, they're gone. Well, now if we can get those families in here sooner, I think, you know, hopefully, and we'll see what the numbers show us in 2 years, we might see bigger crowds. And one thing I did share, that if we get to the point where we're having bigger crowds, that we might need to have to add more game workers, but again, those would be good problems to have.
Right. How are we deciding if it's our kids versus visiting schools?
ID.
But like
What's that?
pre,
Well, we didn't talk about,
Oh,
we did, 'cause I
Didn't
think
talk about the
Mr. Hodges was at that meeting, he's like, well, don't count on the student ID part, so.
I was
We'll
thinking
have-
elementary school, for example.
Yeah, we'll have, the good thing is that Tammy knows 99% of everybody, so that's very helpful for us. But we'll have some type of a list, like we do our pass list
Just
system.
curious, yeah.
And then, you know, she's really good about this, as soon as you walk in the door, before you even get to the table, yeah, you're on the list, you're good, so. But, you know, there's gonna be some
right.
bumps in the road
Mhm.
on that as well.
We would run into the problem with student passes anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
No, I absolutely love this, and I think I remember hearing the number, this was a long time ago, so correct me. But isn't like the money that we bring in for extracurriculars, isn't like 0.05% of,
If you're talking about overall general fund budget, yeah, $14 million budget for the
Yeah.
high school part of it, but.
it's literally a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, and I would bet just because I've had kids, I'll speak for myself, and whatever happens with the rest of them can happen, but my kid's gonna eat more at the concession table.
Yep, well,
Yeah.
that's the next point I was gonna bring up, that's just whatever group is in charge of the concession stand,
They'll be making
they're
big.
still gonna, the money's still gonna come in, it's just shuffled around.
I think I mentioned back in the day when I was walking around during an athletic event, McInerney was in that back corner, watching the door, and kids were coming in. I says, Mac, shouldn't they be paying? Where else do you want them to be tonight, Bob? So true, that's exactly where we want them to be. Consideration to approve the extracurricular recommendation committee.
I'll make a motion.
Can I
I'll
say
second.
one thing quick? Once again, it's important that it's regular season,
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
games only,
Right,
regular season.
yeah, and the reasoning is,
Because we don't get the gate for those section games.
yeah,
We gotta send those up.
yeah.
send them up.
And I would say at the committee level too, the coaches that are on that committee were super excited about this, about, you know,
They want the fans.
yeah, and they want that exposure to those kids that they may be
Yeah.
watching a sport they never would have watched at in second grade or third
Or that
grade. Or,
they never thought they would be able to play, or.
yeah, be interested in it all,
Get
yeah.
interested in it.
So they were really excited about that, and I think it will lead to participation in it too.
So we have a motion by Clint
I'll second.
and a second by Katie. And now you can continue that discussion if you like. I wanted to get through that part, and good. Any other discussion?
No, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it is. All in favor of the free admission for pre-K through 12th grade students, all Cannon Falls students, regular season for 2 years? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Moving on, consideration to approve a change to the 22-24 Cannon Kids and Preschool Support Contract.
Earlier this year, I'm thinking it was probably in the fall / early winter time, we discovered that employees that work in community ed in general were being given free Cannon Kids care before and after school, and we couldn't figure out where that was approved by the board. And so I put a stop to that immediately. And then we said there needs to be a better way, and we want to use this more to be a little bit more targeted, I guess, and have the people that actually work in Cannon Kids to get that free childcare. We felt that that was more appropriate, and so we're asking you to approve this MOU to their support staff contract to add this change where Cannon Kids staff members will receive the free childcare while working their scheduled shift.
We look for motion to approve that change.
I would make a motion to approve that change. I think it's a great way for you to get
Hopefully as a benefit.
Keep staff.
and keep staff because
Yep. I'll second it.
Katie on the motion, Jolynn on the second. Further discussion?
Is this currently cutting anyone out then? Of,
What's the delineation you get clear on?
so, so as of today, it's written as anybody in community ed. Are we
Right,
losing?
we communicated that
Okay.
earlier.
you already stopped that.
We've already stopped that, was it late fall?
Last summer,
Oh,
but it was anybody that worked in community ed, the unwritten rule was they get free Cannon Kids and free preschool
Oh,
tuition.
yep, that's right, free preschool.
So then that changed. So what spurred this on is just, we have openings, we're not getting applicants, so we're trying to entice people. Because some of it is, well, what do I do with, if I can't have,
Right,
I'm not gonna work and then
And
pay
then-
an hourly
right.
for the kids. too.
it would be a wash.
So,
Yeah.
but we put it in so that it's only while they're working. So it's not like I sign up for a 1-day-a-week shift, but I'm gonna send my kids 5 days where,
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was.
while
very
they're working,
targeted.
and so it's just Cannon Kids.
Okay, we have a motion, the second on the floor, to approve the change of the 22-24 Cannon Kids and preschool support contract. Any other discussion?
So, from a negotiation standpoint, would this eventually be written into the contract?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
we'll just cover
MOUs, once we get to the negotiations, it'll be automatically.
Okay, right.
Okay. Okay, we'll close the discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consideration to approve adding a 1.0 FTE academic general education paraprofessional for 23-24.
Yes, we've been talking for quite a long time now in regards to adding this para position and trying to find a way to fund it with one of the reading core positions ending. There was a lot of questions around whether we could find a way to keep that. We did explore a lot of areas, and ironically, the legislature all of a sudden, through some last-minute thing, put in giving districts money for adding at least a 1.0 or a part-time student support staff position, and that can go, that's very wide-ranging
Awesome.
in scope. And so we will be getting $40,000 from the legislature to add a student support position. And so what I'd like to recommend is that we hire the academic paraprofessional that we've been talking about for a while and advertise for that starting tomorrow. And that person will work with interventions and RTI with the teachers there.
We hear a motion to approve,
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll
Luke?
second.
and Katie on the second. Any other discussion?
Well, I think the idea of having the academic very, very helpful.
Yeah. Especially since if we can get some of it, it already has the rapport with the kids.
For sure.
Okay, we'll close the discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve a medical leave from June 8 through September 8, 23.
This is for Kim Houghton, and I recommend approval.
Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Jolynn on the motion,
I'll second.
seconded by Luke. Any other discussion? All in favor of the approval of this medical leave, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Consideration to approve a resignation at the close of the 22-23 school year.
This is for Rocky Jean, and I recommend approval.
motion?
No motion.
Motion by Bill. Second?
I'll second.
Second by Clint. Any other discussion? It's too bad, a good man, good educator.
And what did you teach?
High school five.
Also coached him with
Okay.
All in favor of the approval of this resignation at the close of the 22-23 school year, say aye.
the.
Opposed? Carried. Consideration to post and hire a .50 FTE preschool teacher for the 23-24 school year.
So there's been some discussion throughout last year and, or this past year, I should say, about our preschool numbers and where they are headed. And so we started looking at historical data and having conversations around how to fit as many kids in, obviously with our population declining over the past years for various reasons. We want to make sure that we are capturing as many students as we can to get them in our buildings, and the hopes is that they will stay long-term, and usually data shows that once kids are in buildings, they usually stay long-term. And so on this spreadsheet, you will see that there's data pulled from starting in 2020, where there was 4 classrooms at the time. And historically, what we did was we pulled registration numbers from March 1st through the 30th, and then added late registrations after June 1st into these numbers. And these two numbers down here equal the number here, if that makes sense, so that you're tracking this and kind of understanding where we're headed with this. So if you look over the next few years, we went from 74 to 85, and then to 93 and 22, 23. And then this year, and what I want to call your attention to is the last few years in the early registration period from March 1st to the 30th, you'll see that there are some pretty consistent numbers in the 40s and 50s. And then usually after June 1st, you would see the numbers into the 30s of kids registering. This year, we already have 93 in the window from March 1st to May 17th.
That's great.
Now, with that being said, there's been a lot of communication around that we would like you to register early this year. I can't guarantee that the history will stay the same in this 30 number.
No, Jeff, you showed me the 30 number, so we're gonna get another.
Okay. And so the thinking is, we want to try adding in half-time preschool teacher, and the next agenda item would be the half-time para position, which would go with that classroom. And so I think the data is a good piece of information right now. This, by going from 4 to 5, or 4 to 4.5 classrooms, it allows still room for expansion for the early childhood screening that takes place during the year, and plus it adds, we still have spaces for any registrations that come in from today moving forward. There will be a few spots. Again, if we get to a waiting list again, I think it's a good problem to have, but I don't want to overshoot by saying that we need a full-time position at this point, because I think that would be somewhat overextending, but this is a good conservative approach to at least starting that discussion.
Where would that classroom be, that half-time teacher classroom, where?
Did you have that read?
206, right?
Was-
Kids one?
Where's that, down,
Two.
down all?
First one,
all the way at the
first
end?
one at Dorsey, yeah, first
Okay.
one at the left.
Okay.
So in order to get to that full-time, what would that, after June 1st number have to be?
Well, we want to advertise, I think we have to advertise for the halftime now.
Sure. But I'm just kind of.
If we get 30 more kids in, I think we would have to have another discussion in early August to at least look at it again to see how they fit, because there's so many variables that fit into that number, whether they're full-time every day, half-time every day,
Oh, sure, where they fall in.
where they fall in.
Where they
and-
fall in,
and
their registration.
there's so many variables that I can't say for sure that, if if we have enough to get another classroom for another halftime in the morning, or maybe it's a halftime in the afternoon, I don't know. And maybe we don't feel comfortable at that time at offering that other halftime piece, but I can say pretty confidently that we are confident with the halftime addition right now. And, you know, even adding, what was that spreadsheet we put together earlier this year? Was it 2 students?
Yeah, so it would compound on itself, obviously, so if you were to say if 2 kids that normally would be in the district, by the time they get to kindergarten, then you start receiving the revenue from the state on it. Roughly with all the tails, you know, about a round number of $10,000 a kid, so as you track those 2 kids all the way through to graduation, plus 2 more behind, 2 more behind, 2 more behind, it becomes a pretty significant amount of money to the district potentially to keep them there. So I think you'll find when you do it, look at prelim budget, there's obviously gonna be a cost to it up front, and it's gonna take some time for it to come back, but I think, as you talked about, if you can get kids in the building, they tend to stay. I think it also probably would help with, just I probably do too much anecdotal, but for my kid, it's going to be in school and have that socialization and that kind of groundwork set up for when kindergarten started. So.
Yeah, this data is great. You know, when I first asked, you know, why are we waitlisting kids when enrollment seems to be, why does that happen? And I certainly understand we only have so many teachers and so many classrooms, and we don't want to load them up. So, you know, I do appreciate us making an effort to capture as many as possible, but also supporting with the hiring here, because that was pretty evident when I had conversations of, that's great, we want more kids, but if you don't hire, if you don't, you know, support us, we can't just have more kids in our classroom. So I think this is super important to add this as well.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept or to approve.
I'll second.
Luke on the motion, Katie on the second, to post and hire a .50 FTE preschool for the upcoming school year. Any other discussion?
I noticed that there's one more category expected for next year. That last one, the Monday through Friday, 8 to 11. Not that it makes a big difference because it's only 3 kids, but, you know, is that just a change?
That's all that I've just signed up for from, at this time.
For the fall.
Well, but comparing it to this year, there's only
Because
5 categories, but
We made more of an emphasis for the first time that Monday through Friday, full-time registration are gonna get guaranteed a spot. They're gonna be first priority. And so that's a part of why you see the 49 up there down to the 31. And we also feel that that's also part of why we've got 93 here up to this point right now. So whether we're gonna see that average 30 number after June 1 or not, you know, could be 50-50, we'll have to see.
well,
Sure.
probably not real likely, but.
Right, but we just, it could be 10, it could be 15, it could be whatever.
So that 3 number on Monday to Friday, half day, if we hire this position, and will we honor those spots, or will we try to encourage them to go to a full day, Monday to Friday? Will they be able to pick that still?
Right,
If there's only 3 or?
right now, we have all of those 93 kind of placed in 5 classes, or 4.5.
So it'll work for potentially more
With
families?
still room.
Yeah, awesome.
I think the other interesting thing to note too, so if you look back to 2021, you see with 4 classrooms, there was 11 to 14 kids in each room versus the upcoming 17 to 18 kids in a room. It's quite a jump of extra little bodies bouncing around and teachers trying to contain all that. So, correct, yes.
Okay.
That's a good problem, man.
Yeah, good problem.
Especially when they're just learning how to be at school.
We'll
Sit
close
still.
discussion. We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve that .50. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve the post and hire of a .5 FTE preschool paraprofessional.
Make the motion.
I'll second.
That was much more quickly. Jolene on the motion. Bill on the second. Other
Let's
dis-
go
Be
together.
together, so.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor of this hire paraprofessional, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve a 1.0 FTE second grade teaching contract.
Yes, this is for Becca Schmallenberg, and I recommend approval.
I'll move to approve.
Luke on the motion,
I'll second.
Clint on the second. Other discussion? All in favor of the approval of the 1.0 second grade teaching contract, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve a 1.0 FTE preschool teaching contract.
This is for Sammy Cromer, and I recommend approval.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Clint on the motion, Jolene on the second. Other discussion? All in favor of the 1.0 preschool teaching contract, say aye. Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve the fiscal year 24 prelim budget.
Josh has put together our initial budget look at next year. We did have a finance committee meeting last week. We had a technical issue with our board members that were on the list, and I didn't think anything of it because board members didn't show up. I thought they were busy or whatever else, but we did have community members here that showed up as well. So we hopefully have that figured out, and we will be good going forward, so. Josh?
Yep, I feel bad, Bob, we just got kind of rolling and I'm gonna grind it back down to a halt. But, what we have here is just the prelim budget for fiscal '24. We do this in May, prior to, so we have a budget in place by the time the fiscal year starts July 1. Likewise, you'll end up getting this sort of same version of information next month with the prelim for '23. There are a lot of assumptions in this one, and as I talked in the finance meeting, probably more so in this preliminary budget than in many others. And I know I've talked with Jeff a little bit, that generally we wait until December, January before we revise the budget, and given where legislation's at and that they've kind of wrapped up, and we don't even know what all is going to entail, and what either strings or tails may be assigned to things, that it may be real important for us to take a look at this a lot earlier, which even could be as soon as late summer, early fall, to have a better look at where we're at in revising a budget potentially. Some things to note in this, because we were pretty confident that they were going to go 4%. There is 4% on the formula in the revenues for this. We expect to see our tech levy come in this fiscal year. And then there's some discussion with the state, and I believe it's going to go through. I think Jeff had shown that 44% of our cross subsidy being covered. And what that is for, not everybody's familiar with maybe some of the lingo and special education. We get reimbursed essentially about 65–66% of those dollars that are spent. There's a large portion, obviously, that is funded through just general fund dollars. That's the cross subsidy that the district is kind of responsible for. And what the state's going to do is help offset some of that 34% cost. It looks like 44% of that 34% coming back to the district. So there's some of those dollars put into this budget as well. So some really good things revenue-wise. Some of the things that kind of hit expenditures is we did not make any reductions or cuts going into fiscal '24. We did add back, it's not really an add back, it's just a moving of where the funding is coming from. A third grade teacher had been funded through ESSER to help reduce some class sizes, and that was added back, and I'll have to go through the general fund. We just talked about the regular education para. There also is going to be, as John talked about, some offset through the state, some funding to help cover that cost. Fuel and utilities, you guys have kind of seen that in terms of just percentage inflation. We pay more than we have prior in those areas, so there's significant increases for those areas in both fuel and utilities, as well as just kind of vehicle cost. In our transportation meeting, we talked about how we're rotating our vehicles through in order to keep good maintenance schedules, both keep reliable vehicles on base, but also keep in good graces with DOT. Vans are only allowed to be on the road for 12 years from the date of manufacture, whereas buses, as long as DOT passes, they can go for a long time. But based on our rotations, we've got each school bus gets replaced every 15 years, which in the front end, that's good. The warranty covers a lot of it. In the back end, there's some more cost, obviously. But in the past, we've been buying buses and budgeting for about $90,000 for a bus. Now, the last bus we paid for was 110, and that's going to increase going forward. This next bus that we bought, I believe it's still be got for the 110, but it's a gas bus instead of a diesel. We're going to try out a gas bus to see what kind of use we get out of that. The diesel on the counterpart would probably be about $130,000. Likewise with vans, we would in the past be able to budget between $20,000 and $25,000 and get a bare bones van from a dealer on a government price for that. Last one we just purchased was $44,000. So there are increases, as you've seen in your home, that directly affected the district budget as well. So those sorts of costs and increases are included in the expenditures, as well as all contracts that have already been negotiated for fiscal '24, meaning they were done in fiscal '23 and they're carrying over. Those are all in, so the salaries and benefits are included in that. There is an assumption or kind of a contingency based on what teacher's contract will be the biggest one that will be negotiated for '24. We have some built-in increase in there for that. Yeah, we don't obviously know where that's going to fall, but there's some cost built into that. But what isn't here that we do know is the steps. As teachers move along through steps, there's an automatic increase built in, and that portion is put into this as well. So in terms of salary and benefits, other than the final negotiation for the teachers, most of this stuff is already covered into the expenditures. I tried to do the best I could to get all that tied in so we have that set. I think what we're going to see as we go through, depending on how the final bill is written, if there is unemployment that's paid by the district for summer, that's going to be a cost that's probably going to eat into potentially that 4%, or it's going to have to be something that we cash flow get reimbursed from the state, depending on how the details flow out on that. Likewise with paid FMLA, there'll be some costs there, whether depending on how the mechanism is, how they do that, whether it be similar to your FICA tax where it's added on as a portion, but there'll be an increase on there. One other item, I guess, TRA continues to grow up each year, and it was at 8.55%. Next year it's 8.75%, and that's built into this as well. But that will be a slight increase too, depending on where, again, the negotiation would end up on that. So you try to pull all these things together and throw them into the pot and see where they end up, and you get the really far away version of where your pre-done budget is for '24, but it gives us something to work with. What you would normally see, and you would see this when we do the revised budget, is potential or projected audit total. I don't like to do that on the pre-done budget because you're taking an estimate on an estimate on an estimate. The fiscal '23 budget, we're estimating based on what the final audit was from '22. We'll be taking kind of what that estimate of what '23 is to try to estimate what '24 would be, so I don't like to show that, but you see just based on revenues over expenditures, there will be a slight increase to the general fund balance. It's not a significant increase. What we talk about in our fund balance policy is striving to 4 to 6% of our undesignated dollars in the general fund. Undesignated dollars are dollars that are really at the discretion of the district and the board when it comes time to whether it be negotiations or staffing or other items that need to be dealt with in the district, that kind of saving comes for the district to have. Designated funds would be like for LTFM, for severance, capital projects, those sorts of things are dollars that really we can't touch with. But an auditor would like you to strive to the 12 to 16%, so you have 2 months reserve. If anything major catastrophic were to happen in a district, it's not maybe the most realistic number to get to. Because what we end up balancing back and forth each year, both admin and district-wide, is we want to make sure that we're definitely healthy financially. We also make sure we're doing the best we can for our district and the staff and the students inside of it too. So it really is kind of hard to move that needle on the undesignated fund balances. We try to offer the best that we can for students and staff, but still do what we can to be fiscally solvent and responsible. I think that like I said, based on what legislature will finally come in with, even on this revenue projection, we usually have a what-if formula or a document spreadsheet that we can plug in our information. That hasn't been set up. We're operating really on last year's what-if, and I just kind of mess with the formula for the amount of the dollar. And that's because they don't want to put out a product that's not really set for legislative either, so it is a big guess. So, like I said, you probably will be seeing our revised 24 budget a lot sooner than you normally would in a year. But that kind of gives you the overrun of the big, large version of the general fund coming up. That one takes the most time to go through. If there's any questions, then I kind of go through the next ones fairly quickly, but if you have any questions on the general fund, I can certainly answer questions.
Joe, could you speak to the community service numbers?
Yep, so, and that's, I guess, I was going to say, if you're wrapped up with general fund, I'd go on to the next one, no questions for that. Did you have one, or you just?
No, sorry.
I don't have my glasses on, I just get moving out.
I'll put my pen down for now. I'll go back to
No,
Joe.
you're good, like I said, I can't see it past my nose without my glasses. So, general fund, slight increase, and again, that number will change based on where final negotiations end up and where final legislation ends up. So that's still kind of a moving target there, but that's our best estimate for now. Food service, there's going to be big changes there as well. You know that the paths are going to have free lunches again, but the number and how that's going to be administered is not going to maybe be the same as it was during COVID. During COVID, it was all through federal, and it's based on the free reduced, and it's a larger reimbursement rate. So we, normally in food service, it really is a kind of a break even. They don't want you earning lots of money in your food service. They want you making profits off your families that way. They do want you to operate in a healthy manner, be able to take care of what you need. But most years prior to receiving those federal dollars for free reduced, we were writing, it's not a check, it's a journal entry, but a check from the general fund back into food service to offset a loss in food service. Last year, we were able to cover things like an allocation of fuel and utilities, some custodial type costs, do the construction project at the elementary to help with the kiddos there to not have to reach up like this for their food, those sorts of items. In the fiscal 23 budget, we also have, so this will help with the project, but some coolers over at the elementary. They're able to get with those funds. So the large kind of decrease in expenditure for food service for fiscal 24 is we don't have that expenditure built into the fiscal 24 budget because we've taken care of it in 23. We're now kind of normalizing back into what it was prior to COVID. Well, by throwing this into it with the state funding the free lunches, we're not quite exactly sure how that revenue is going to look. So again, real important for us as we go through that this will have to be revised on where those numbers are going to be for revenue, since we're kind of going back to not having to charge families for lunches. The expenditures are going to be there. We're going to have staff that need to do things, so those are going to be fairly close, but where the revenue ties out, that could change and adjust. Where that could be to the benefit of the district is if the reimbursement rate for meals is higher than anticipated. The expenditures, we're able to allow them back, like we were talking about, allocate some fuel utilities and custodial type costs, so we help then offset some of those expenses. Community service, and that's the big negative one, so I know that's what we're going to talk about. Generally, when we get to community ed, we've talked, and our auditors have mentioned this each time that they come in and talk, it's real common in districts our size to operate at a deficit because it really is seen as a community support function of what the school is trying to offer for its community, and having access to be able to be the preschool programs or just community activities in general. This budget does include the two items that you just approved, based on, I want to make sure I put everything in that I can to begin with, so those numbers are in here. So there is some cost to that, and that would be eventually hopefully realized as we go on throughout the years as those kids are staying in the district. And there should be some offset to revenue with the general fund. Inside community ed, the preschool teachers are on teacher's contract. Those salaries are in the community service fund, but the benefits we take out of general fund, that was just the deal that we kind of worked when that had happened, and we put that group onto the teacher's contract. What will maybe need to be adjusted or talked about is what we charge you for, whether it be for Canon Kids or preschool or the program offerings. potentially it'd be an item for discussion. Because generally what happens is, we're not allowed in food service to go into a negative balance. You are in community account, but you don't want that number to get wildly out of control in a negative manner. So, because eventually what happens is it's a reconciliation through the general fund, and right now the general fund couldn't support taking all of that deficit. But it is something we want to make sure we're keeping an eye on and working on ways to maybe minimize or reduce that negative balance in community ed. I don't know if that helps answer some of your questions, Bill, if you had another specific question for community ed.
Well, just the change from year to year, is dramatically higher, the deficit.
Yep, and like I said, the biggest portion of the biggest negative increase in that would be to add the half-time preschool, half-time para, the teacher para part of that group.
Yeah,
There will be some revenue that comes back from it,
with the numbers, but.
but it's not preschool registration doesn't quite come in at the same rate as an ADM for
For a teacher.
normal school. Yeah. Fund 6 is our construction, and that's only here because we have a construction project. Normally, this wouldn't be the case. Kind of the exciting news for here is that we sold the bond in '22, so it gets to show for 3 years. All the revenue we received in fiscal '22, and that's why you don't see a whole lot of revenue in fiscal '24. That's just gonna be some interest money that we'll still be earning, as the project kind of will be closed up in '24. But what I've done, and you'll see when I revise the '23, we'll reduce the amount of expenditure in '23 from the building because we just haven't spent as much, and we'll move that ahead into '24 as we spend the rest of that down. So it's totally fine in the construction fund to see that negative balance because we receive those funds and they're in our fund balance. And this will just spend that down during the fiscal year. Debt service, we are set with the counties to have our essentially the mortgage payments on our debt, Fieldhouse Auditorium, the tech levy is in there. We have this new project, the 22A in there. We generally receive, they set the levy at 105% of what our need is, in anticipation there'll be some delinquent people that don't pay in the taxes. Generally in Goodhue County, we do a very good job paying taxes, and we end up having a debt excess, and usually when it comes time to levy, we're able to push some of that money back to the taxpayers. Again, it's maybe doesn't amount to a whole lot, but it's better than the alternative, I guess. But it's really common in our budgets to see expenses over revenue in the debt service as we're able to contribute some of that excess back to the taxpayer. But again, to see that negative is no big deal there because we are set to fulfill the obligations or the needs that we have to make those payments on in a timely manner and not put ourselves in a bad spot. The last one is the trust and agency. And until the last couple of years, that really was just your scholarship fund. And what we've kind of added here, because trust agency is an account that rolls over from year to year, and there are some projects, and that's why the scholarships are in there, so we can hold them in trust until those dollars are spent out. What we have in here now is also the Gemini, the large donation they made, $100,000 towards the Maker Lab. We keep that in there as Tim has started to make some of those purchases in fiscal '23, but the majority is going to happen in '24, so we'll carry those over. So you see an increase in revenue and expense in there because of those sort of items. But the other thing is a scoreboard. You've seen with not only the soccer field and the football field at John Birch Park with the advertising, we received some funds for advertising on that, but in the gym, those advertisings, they come into the trust agency and then they're used for Reed to kind of spend in activities, projects that we maybe would not normally be able to do through either limited funds availability through the district or an item that we just probably need to have taken care of, but we just wouldn't be able to do so in the district. So that's held within that area too in the trust agency, and that allowed that for him to carry those funds over year to year and then use that. So, like I said, in general, this is the first kind of or the chance at the prelim budget for '24. It's important we have one in place when we start July 1. For as exciting as this stuff is, you're going to probably see it a little bit earlier than you would have in a normal year. So, any questions? Let me know. Yeah.
Questions for Josh?
further amounts to approve?
Bill has moved to approve the preliminary budget for fiscal year '24. Second. Seconded by Luke. Further discussion? All in favor of the approval of the fiscal year '24 prelim budget, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve the 23-24 John Birch Park agreement with the city of Cannon Falls.
Yes, this agreement is renewed every year, and the only change to it is the addition of a $5,000 cost increase each year moving forward as part of their capital projects down there. The city has already passed this. I received notification from Neil today, and so it's up to the board tonight to pass it, and we'll get it signed, but it's ready to go for next year.
Motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Luke on the motion, Jolynn on the second. Further discussion?
I think it's just an example of the district working with the city, and we work also with 10 schools too, so it's a good thing.
Yep. Okay, close the discussion. All in favor of the approval of the 23-24 John Birch Park agreement with the city of Cannon Falls, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Consideration to approve the following new Cannon Falls Ed Foundation board members.
Yes, the board members are listed there below as a recommendation from the Ed Foundation to the school board. The names are Bonnie Shoquist, Jeff Schoenfelder, Brenda Owens, Carrie Schleep, Andy Althoff, Cliff Gorman, and Jacob Reinhardt. You guys want to add to that as committee members?
It's good that we're getting more bodies. Sounds like they need help in that area, so.
You twisted some arms at home, didn't you?
I figured we weren't busy enough, so.
Those are all really good people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good group. Good group.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, we had some people coming off that served a couple terms and a lot of years, and a fair amount of time goes into this, so it's just a
Their
big,
events and everything, and
a big thank you to everyone that was going off the board, and a big thank you to the people that are willing to step up and to continue this on. So, very important foundation.
Brenda's continuing on.
She was really looking forward to it. She wanted to be a part of it.
I'll second.
Katie made the motion, Luke made the second to approve the new board members as shown. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Teacher resignation.
Yes, we have a teacher resignation that we are asking the board to approve, and that is for Karen Benson, fifth grade teacher.
Motion to approve the resignation.
I'll make a motion.
Jolynn, and we have a second to that.
I'll second.
Seconded by Katie. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Okay, take a look and see what's on our plate for the upcoming month. And if you have anything else you'd like to add or bring into discussion, please contact either Jeff or Lori and see if we can get that on. Anything as we close? Anything for the cause? If not, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Katie on the motion to adjourn, seconded by
I'll second.
Luke. Other discussion? Busy meeting tonight, huh? All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We are finished.